Hello and welcome, Exiles, to a throwback to Flameblast totems, also known as pizza totems. Roughly around, I want to say, 3-4 years ago, maybe even 5. This was, believe it or not, a meta build. It was very popular, and I don't know if it got worse, it got nerfed, I'm not sure. For whatever reason, it's been non-existent, or I haven't seen people build in a while. I never built it, so I figured, you know what, let me try it out. And what we have here is a build where we scale a lot of cast speed, so that way the Flame Blasts go up fast with totems, along with building into a combination of Omni and the Rational Doctrine Jewel. The one thing I think is a pretty cool combo that I always want to build sometimes is Omni in combination with either a Templar or a Scion, and then do the Rational Doctrine, because you get both benefits from the you get both benefits from Rational Doctrine as well as the scaling of Omni without really having to think much about it, because Rational Doctrine says, hey, if your highest attribute is int, you get this. If your highest attribute is strength, you get this. And if they're matching and they're both the highest, you get the benefit of both. This works great if you're doing like a leadership's price build with maximum int and strength being equivalent, or what I'm doing here, which is an Omni character where you don't really have to think about it. You throw on Omni, you make some Omni gear, you throw in Rational Doctrine, and all of a sudden you have Lingering Conk Ground, which gives you curse effect reduction on top of regen on top of the crit and minus res from Profane Ground. The other cool thing about this is it pairs nicely with a totem character such as Hierophant using Soul Mantle. Soul Mantle curses yourself, and you're thinking, how do I deal with these curses? Well, the standard way I've seen people do it, if they use the Maven helmet, which makes you basically curse immune or whatever, that's completely overkill. You don't need something like that. Pairing it with something like Rational Doctrine with the curse reduction from Conk Ground, adding in Devotion, all of a sudden you're at 62.5% curse reduction with just those two things, Conk Ground and that. And then I combine that with the Pantheon node, 30%. This is awkward. I never remembered to do that. Oh my word, this entire time I have not been playing with Yugalong because I forgot to do that. Oh, this is awkward. So these curses are actually doing more to my build than they should be. Anyways, you would get 92.5% curse reduction if I actually had this on, but I apparently forgot to do that. Whoops. The other way to deal with it is you can get a belt enchant, which gives 30% curse reduction there from the enchant, so you don't need the Pantheon in the end, but apparently I forgot, so this is a bit awkward now. But anyways, the idea is you pretty much get immunity to curses between your Conk Ground and the Pantheon, and then in combination with that, you can then curse yourself a bunch with this chest piece here, Soul Mantle, and then benefit from the significant damage increases from a self-flagellation jewel, which pairs nicely with Soul Mantle. The reason Soul Mantle is just so ubiquitous with totem builds is when you have a chest piece that represents a 7-link and you can easily get it with a +2 corruption or a +4 corruption if you had the +1 socketed gem as well instead of damage, it's just too strong to ignore. And not to mention that the self curses with self-flagellation is a massive damage boost as well. I think it's a pretty hard chest piece to beat, and that's what I went with here. The other cool combination with all of this is a Pious Path. One of my favorite notables from the Inquisitor is Pious Path, the node that lets you sustain both life and ES at the same time, which allows you to build into a hybrid-based character. If we have a chest piece that has a decent amount of ES, and we pair it with a shield that has a decent amount of ES, and we pair it with something like Melding on the tree while scaling life, we're going to end up with a build that has, 4k life, 1.5k ES, and that ends up being quite good. What can we get in terms of sustain? Well, I chose Pious Path. We already have the Conk Ground from Rational Doctrine, so Pious Path gives us all of our regen is built on top of our ES as well. And then when you pair that with a Hierophant, which gets regen per totem, all of a sudden you have a character that gets up to, we put down our totems, we get to about 1k regen of both. And then if I proc something like my Flask with 3% regen, we're at 2k regen per second, which is a fairly good sustain. It allows you to have Righteous Fire on a build. And on top of Righteous Fire, we're pairing this with Crucible, where you get max res for fire pretty easy, max res on our shield. And then you pair that with a Purity of Fire, and all of a sudden you have a build with 90 max fire res, and then I once again pair that as well with a Tempered by War, which basically is huge for pen mitigation. You'll know things like Shaper Balls have 25 to 40 pen on the Death Ball phase of Uber Shaper, which hits very, very hard because pen gets by max res, but it doesn't get by max res if you convert the damage taken to another element. So Cold Pen from Shaper is very heavily mitigated by something like Tempered by War, along with mitigation through Suppress. We have Suppress on our build with literally just the Instinct cluster, Lucky Suppress, Anoint, Inveterate, and then we have Suppress on basically one piece of gear. We don't have Suppress on our helmet, we don't have Suppress on our boots, we just have Suppress on our gloves with Suppress on the implicits, and effectively, our suppression chance is not 70%, but actually like 91% when you factor in Lucky Suppress, which is quite consistent and feels good for dealing with spells on top of the other setups we have here. And last but not least, if you're doing an Omni build, you have to do it with large clusters. I realize now when I'm looking at my options, if I ever want to do Omni in the future, I don't know if I'll be able to look past doing a large cluster, which is simply you want to go for either Fractured Life, Fractured Attribute, or Fractured small passive effect, and then you just reforge caster on a fire cluster, because I'm doing Flameblast. If you're doing a cold cluster or something else, you're gonna have to make sure to check the mod pool. But for fire clusters, the only caster mod is the attack and cast speed, and you just do that until you get either effect or a T1 attribute, and then you do annul exalts. These roughly cost me, after fracturing, the fracturing cost is roughly it's a 2 fracturing orbs on average, because you can basically alt spam augment regal until you get basically a T1 life with effect, or a T1 int with effect, or a T1 life with T1 int. One of those, or T1 attribute, it doesn't really matter if it's int, dex, or strength. Fracturing one of those, and then do reforge casters until you hit a decent jewel and do reforge more likely. Like if you get effect and the speed, then do reforge more likely, or if you get attribute, effect, and speed, but they're not T1s, reforge more likely. It's a pretty easy crafting process, not too expensive. The main cost is fracturing it to begin with, but afterwards it's fairly reasonable to finish up a few divines in harvest currency, basically the blue essence currency. And the benefit from this is you get very efficient points that give you percent damage, flat life, speed, and intelligence. And it's just super efficient to grab these, and that's what I went with my Omni character, along with basically just going for Fractured Cast Speed on the rings, do some Essence spamming, and then of course a Suffix Can't Be Changed Veiled Chaos to finish those up. And that's how I went about crafting the vast majority of my gear, was just buying some random Fracture, throw a couple Essence at it, use a Suffix Can't Be Changed, Veiled Chaos, finish it off. Basically your standard issue way to finish this sort of gearing for an Omni-based character. All in all, if we're talking investment, outside of my shield, this is around, I want to say I spent 70 to 80 divines roughly in cost. Originally, I was thinking it was like closer to 65, but then I remembered I got Rational Doctrine because I had it in my stash, and Rational Doctrine is actually like a 10 to 15 divine jewel. So factoring that in, it's closer to 70, 80 divines cost outside of my shield. Where it gets a little bit more expensive, and this is where I'm going to give you recommendations if you want to make this character, is the shield. The shield is one I made previously for my Righteous Fire character, where I got really lucky and I hit a shield that was like perfect if I wanted to do a hybrid Omni hybrid life ES Omni build. And I don't know if I've seen somebody do a hybrid life ES Omni build like this character before, and I thought that would be perfect for it. But what's the example use case? Well, I finally am making a character that fits under that specific niche, and I couldn't pass up using it. All in all, this is a mere tier level shield, but you can get a large portion of the power. Simply all you have to do is go for the attributes on the 3rd and 4th node, the max res, but instead of your first node being implicit magnifier, moditudes, whatever's, you want to go for a 5% int, 5% strength, or I don't know if you can get dex on a shield, but dex would be good on a shield as well. And that would get you, essentially you'd be losing 13% Omni and 30 flat off the synthesized base, but you could go for a fractured base, or you could go for an Awaken Orb, +1 totem, Awaken Orb that with minimum frenzy, something like that is the craft I would go for personally if I were you trying to recreate this build. You're probably going to lose about, I would say, 20 to 30% of the power of this shield, but you're going to save a multitude of divines and spend a lot less. So that is the building blocks of this character. All in all, you may notice I have a portal gem here and a portal gem here. Ultimately, I couldn't think of good use cases. I mean, you can add in coal, do some simple stuff, but I couldn't think of really good use cases for the extra 8 gem slots here. So I just put in portal gems just a meme, and that's what's going on there. That's why I don't have gem slots in my build. I'll go ahead and showcase this Hydra, and then I'll showcase a Formed. This build absolutely destroys in terms of DPS. I'm not sure if it's the best totem build per se. There's probably, like, somebody mentioned Shockwave Totem's really, really good. I can't speak for that. I haven't played Shockwave Totem, but this has felt quite good in terms of a build, in my opinion, from playing it, especially considering the cost was around 70 to 80 divines, and then if you factor in a regular, like a more normal shield, put in like 10 divines, crafting that, go for a 3-4 mod shield, and I'm pretty sure you'd still be pumping quite feels good numbers, while also being a Totem Flameblast build. I usually talk a lot of smack about Totems, and that's mostly because I don't enjoy the playstyle. I think Totems are very strong builds, generally speaking, and while playing this character, I definitely felt that was the case. I felt this was a strong character. It felt like the damage was easy. It felt like I had a pretty feels-good playstyle. If I just put totems down and I don't really have to mentally think what's going on, they target the enemies automatically. I can put most of my brain power into dodging attacks. The one downside of playstyle is if I do something really stupid, like say I have all my totems over here and I dash into a pack and then I'm like, I don't have the totems up, that's a little bit of a sketchy scenario where you can die. So basically just don't do stuff like that, and they end up panning out just fine in terms of like what's going on. And then on top of all that, there's also the issue of if you wanted to do this character in like super dangerous mapping content that the monsters are attacking your totems before they even get to like do stuff, then that can be a little bit awkward, but for the most part it shouldn't be an issue. And this is what it looks like on Phoenix. Looks like he teleported away just barely. We almost had him. Keep in mind, this is a feels good mapping setup. This is faster casting. This is awakened AoE. This isn't a single target setup. You could go single target by putting conk effect here, and you could even swap out faster casting for something like an empower. If you really wanted to go single target, you could push that more. It didn't feel necessary to me. Technically, I did some Ubers on conk effect, but ultimately I could have done Ubers with just this awakened AoE here. The DPS is good enough. And yeah, this is my take on pizza totems, on Flameblast spell totems with a Hierophant. I think Hierophant just pairs so nicely with these new nodes, with using an Omni, with using the go-to 12 passive clusters. I think this is just a build that has a lot of nice synergies that fit together well. The one thing I would say is if you wanted to stress defense, go a little bit less on offense. Offense we have is obviously overkill. Potentially what you could do is swap out Zealotry, change the Watcher's Eye from Zealotry to like Armor Watcher's Eye, grab these armor nodes to start out with here, and maybe grab Faith and Steel and 10% Fizz taken as Chaos, cap your Chaos Res, and all of a sudden you're looking at a build that has 8% Fizz taken as here. You could get technically up to like 2% Fizz taken here instead of getting like, I got some flat strength and I think I have double dam somewhere. You get Fizz taken as here, Fizz taken as on Watcher's Eye, and then Fizz taken as Chaos from here, and all of a sudden you're looking at like 30-40% Fizz taken as. You have 4 minimum endurance charges, and then you pair that with like 20k armor. It's going to end up feeling quite good in terms of Fizz mitigation. I felt with just the about 20% Fizz taken as and 4 endurance charges, I think that felt good enough for most scenarios for physical. Obviously, there's still going to be the scenario where we die to it. I just opted for more of the DPS with Zealotry. Completely up to you if you want to run defensive or you want to run offensive on that. Basically, the one thing you do if you care that much more about your Fizz mitigation is probably something like Faith and Steel. Grab these armor nodes, get a % armor on one of these flasks, maybe a granite, and then going for determination instead of Zealotry, and you'll be probably pretty comfortably in the 15 to 25k armor range with like 40% Fizz taken as, along with 4 endurance charges. Should feel pretty good. Anyways, that is my take on pizza totems, and here to finish it all off, we will go ahead and do a form real quick. This should showcase you one last time what this build looks like. I'll throw in a conk effect just to show, I guess, a bit of the DPS difference. It doesn't really make that much of a DPS difference. You spam some totems, you get your curses on you pretty quickly. You say, where are they spawning? They're spawning over here. Let's go over here. Let's put on a frost shield. Let's go curse this guy with Assassin's Mark. Curse that guy with Assassin's Mark. See if he... Oh, my totems aren't targeting correctly. There is a limit for like how far totems can target or whatever. So like you saw there on the Hydra, there was like, I had 5 totems over here and only like 1 of them was targeting. So sometimes you have to reposition them, but with Hierophant you get that extra totem placement speed and it just feels good. It just works out pretty decently. This is my take on Flameblast. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. To see pizza totems are perfectly fine and well in the current meta. They're pretty good, honestly. Don't know if it's the best totem. It's just one I wanted to try out because I haven't seen people do it recently. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. As always, take care, Exiles, and peace out.